Part 3 of the Car Wars 6th Edition Build Guide. Let's finally talk about some cars. I'm Chris Steele, and this is Tabletop Game Talk, a show where I talk about tabletop gaming topics of all kinds, but you wouldn't know it because I've only been able to talk about Car Wars for the past couple weeks. So let's finish up this build guide and talk about cars. The way this is going to go is similar to the last two episodes. I'm going to talk about the basic build rules, and then we're going to look at not all the cards, because we're not going to go into detail on the weapons. There's just too many of them, but we'll take a look at the upgrades, essentially how structure works, and some of the accessories, and then we'll talk about weapons in depth, but again at a high level. Trust me, it'll work out. So let's take a look at what we have so far here. These are all of our build cards. If we remember from our crew episode, these are all of the crew cards. So there's a lot more stuff you can put on the cars, and that makes sense. It is Car Wars after all. It's not called Crew Wars. I don't think that game would sell as well, but maybe it would. I don't know. But what we're going to do is let's take a look at the types of build cards. So we have 4 different types. We have upgrades. Upgrades are going to be equipped to your crew area because they can't be destroyed. They just make something better. You can't have duplicates by name or by subtype, and we'll talk about subtype in just a moment. Structure, you can have 1 structure card per side. Most structures come in sets of 4, so you can have a structure card on each side. There are a couple exceptions, literally a couple. Accessories, just no duplicate names. And then weapons, if you're building a car with 24 or less build points, then you cannot use weapons that cost 6 build points or more. Once you hit 25 build points or Division 7, you can put anything on the car that you want. So let's start out talking about upgrades because they're kind of the simplest thing to understand. Again, putting my dice reference in the corner here, because as we talk about all of these cards, it's going to help us evaluate the value of these cards. This is my little dashboard here that I am going to just set out to the side, since again, these upgrades will go towards your crew, or into your crew area, so they don't actually get equipped to the dashboard. Now, I'm first going to cover a couple sets. These are frames, so these fall into the subtype. You can have 1 of them. So even though they all have different names, they all say upgrade frame, and you can only have 1 frame, or any upgrade that has a subtype, you can only have 1 of those things. So the frame that you're going to choose, and I do recommend you choose a frame because why not? It's just going to make your car better, and they're relatively low in points. But it's really going to depend on what you're trying to do. For example, if you want to do more damage because you want to do damage via collisions, your bumper spikes is going to be great. When this car's front or rear of your car touches a heavy object, it takes 1 additional damage. So you can back into things or ram into things and do damage to them. In fact, when your front of your rear car touches a heavy obstacle or wall, this doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to do this. Someone else can run into you and they would still take an extra point of damage. So that's kind of cool. Also, the safety cage is a way of making collision damage do less to you. So these 2 here, it'd be great to have them both on the car at the same time, but you can't. Also, the punch bumper. This is another one that makes collisions better. When the front or rear of your car touches a heavy obstacle, an explosion occurs. Now, what that essentially means is if you ram another car, you're already both going to lose a control token, but the target here is going to lose another control token. So that's actually super efficient if you want to go and you have your opponent has 2 control tokens. You smash into them, they have no control tokens now, they're now out of control, and then you're going to take 2 shots at them. They're not going to get any dice for speed. Let me just read this to make sure. When the front or rear of your car touches a heavy obstacle or wall, an explosion occurs on the obstacle in addition to the normal collision damage. Yeah, and again, this is another one where you don't even have to be the person causing the collision. It's just if you are collided with. So You can only have one of these. They're all really, really good. This is why I recommend at least taking one frame. You have your brace chassis, take an additional ace token, and each time you make a maneuver at speed 4 or 5. So if you want to drive fast, this is a great way to get some extra ace tokens out of having speed 4 or 5. And then finally, the undercarriage. You get an extra or ace token during your control step, and then once per collision, you may pay 2 of your ace tokens instead of losing a control token. Again, if you could have all of those, you just run all over things, and that's why you can't have all of those. You take the one that makes your collisions most flavorful for you. None of them are bad. All right, so those are frames. The other set of upgrades that I recommend you take is a wheel upgrade. And these all are going to, again, based on your driving style. The easiest one, tire damage does not affect your maximum speed. 1 point. This sounds great until you realize when you take tire damage, you are going to you're automatically going to slow down because your max speed is going to force you to slow down at the very beginning phase of check your speed. That's actually a safety thing because if your speed, say 4, and your tires are completely damaged, you can't hard brake because you can't take tire damage. So it's going to take you quite a bit of time to slow down. So just be very careful with this one because you can put yourself into a situation where you're just driving fast and are out of control because you can't slow down fast enough. So those are our airless tires. They're double-edged sword there. Now your high density radios are nice. They give you 2 ace tokens at the beginning, and whenever you make a driving roll, if you roll tire damage, you can spend 2 ace tokens to eliminate that tire damage. This will keep your tires nice and healthy for a very long time because it's pretty easy to get ace tokens, and right out of the gate here, you're getting 2, which means you can ignore at least one of those tire damages. I really like the radios. That's why they cost double in either of the others. The off-road tires, this one, again, you get 2 control tokens on your take control step, but you also take an additional one based on the highest level of terrain you're overlapping. You would not take this if you're not playing with terrain. If you are playing with terrain, this one could be really good. Even a level 1 terrain is going to get you 3 ace tokens at the beginning of your take control step. So again, it really kind of depends on your scenarios and whether or not you want to drive like crazy with the airless tires. All right, now speaking of driving like crazy, let's take a look at how to make yourself a little bit more defendable while driving like crazy. Now there's 2 cards here. In general, our dashboard, maximum tire damage 10, maximum power plant 10. That's just the cap of all of what you can do, unless you have wheel hubs or power plant shielding. The wheel hubs, your first 2 points of tire damage are going to be applied to this upgrade, and the power plant shielding, the first 2 power plant damage is going to be applied to this upgrade. Now, they have durability. The only way they can take damage is from their abilities, since these are in the crew area and are not equipped to your car. But if you just want to harden your tires and power plant, these are the way to do it. They are pretty pricey, especially at the low point games, but at high point games, they could make the difference between winning and losing. Now, one other one that kind of goes along with this is the ally fasteners. This allows you to increase your armor points by 1. So if I'm playing a Division 3 game and I have 3 armor points, this allows me to go to 4 armor points on all sides for 2 cost. That is quite good, but again, it's 2 build points, and it's really, is it worth it? Now, when we start looking at structure is fairly expensive, but it's going to give you a lot more armor per side. So, and structure is limited to 1 card per. So if you really want to pump your armor and sides, you can do this. Now, I do not know what the ruling is if you're playing a Division 12 game and you're at max 12. I would assume you could just go to 13 and just mark it on the dashboard that you're at 13. It doesn't seem to be a hard limit on armor. It's just what's on the dashboard. And that would sort of work the same way for the power plant armor and the tire and the wheel hubs. So you could play it either way. Honestly, at 12 armor, Do you need an extra one? I don't know, maybe. So the next set of cards I am not a huge fan of. I'm not saying don't get them, because again, it's really, I'm trying to give you a reason to decide to use or not use something, how to evaluate for your cars. But these are all coatings, and you can only have one of them. The base coating costs 2 points. And what it essentially does is when you're being attacked, if that side has any armor on it, then you can add a black die to your defense roll. Now, if you watched the crew guide, then you know that black dice aren't that great for defense. And if you look up here, you can see black dice aren't that great for defense. Black dice have a 17% chance of rolling a defense. So you have to have armor, and you have to be really lucky for this to trigger. Honestly, this is going to be a better buy for 2, but you could have both, and this gives you that extra piece of armor, making this a little bit more useful, a little bit longer. I would say this is probably more valuable in high division games where you have a lot more armor, because it's going to last longer. You're going to get more rolls off of it. Now, for an extra point, you can get specialized coatings. Now, remember, you can only have one of these because these have a subtype of coating. You have a fire coating, a laser coating, and a shock coating. These 3 types of weapons are the least common of the weapons. There's practically no weapon cards of these types. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to see them quite frequently. Someone may have, a lot of people might have flamethrowers or an extra laser or a laser on there or a shock weapon of some sort. It's just when you see those weapons, you're going to know it's just a handful of weapons. Now, I should caveat right now, I have all of the cards except for the cards from Miniature Pack 2 and 4. So there's some accessories, upgrade structures that are in those sets, and there's 20 weapons that are in those sets that I don't have, but I don't expect that to change this effect all that much. These are still going to be relatively rare, but if they are a fire, laser, or a shock weapon, then you get to add a white die instead of a black die. And the white die is significantly better than the black die for defense, because there is a chance of actually defending 2 shields on a single side, or there's 2 sides. It's double the chance of actually defending against at least something. I'm still not sure on these ones. I would have to play around with them a little bit more. I think I might try the camouflage one. The fire one, it feels like there's other ways to defend against fire, better ways to defend against fire. The laser and shock, I just don't know. Laser and shock are interesting because they both reduce, well, not shock, but lasers reduce range rerolls, so maybe having the extra dice wouldn't be too bad to have. So those are coatings. Kind of give them a try. They're, again, at a high point game or even a medium point game, it can't hurt to, try them out. So let's take a look at, we have one other card before I get to the special cards. This is the defensive system. Each time you are attacked, you may place 1 damage token on this card to add 2 blue dice to your defense roll. Now, I've gone back and forth on this card. You get to use it 3 times. Essentially, 2 blue dice is going to average 1 defense. So in theory, this 3 durability here is going to defend against 3 damage. However, it does cost 3 points to do. There is a hidden benefit to this card, though, that I think makes it really, really good. And that is those blue dice, you get to decide when you're going to take them. This is an upgrade, so it can't take damage in any other way. So this is basically just 3 uses of it. But imagine you're out of control. You have some ace tokens. Now you get to roll 2 blue dice. Ace. This is a 50-50 for a shield. Those ace tokens are likely going to flip those blue dice to a shield, because if you get to roll a blue die twice, the average is one of them is going to be a shield. So this is one of those things where you may want to have this just to have when you're out of control, so you can get 2 defense and spend those ace tokens. It's one of the most efficient ways to use those ace tokens, because the blue die is one of the best die for a defense roll, the red being the other one. But yeah, I like this card. It's 3 points, so it's kind of pricey, but in a medium size, I'd say, Division 5 plus, 3 points is worth sparing for, essentially what you could potentially be 6 defense. All right, 2 cards that are super cool, and that's the simple concealment system and the complex concealment system. These work essentially the same way. You put them out. They are both exclusive, which basically means you can't have more than one exclusive card in your build at all. But they read on the 4-point card, at any point during your movement phase or combat phase, you can flip this down to add 3 build points worth of weapons to your car. It can be 1 3-point weapon, or it can be 3 1-point weapons. You get 3 build points added to your car. This is a great, because this can't be destroyed. Therefore, if you have a side of your car where a weapon gets destroyed, you can flip this over and boom, hey, guess what? I concealed a different weapon on that side, or whatever the case is. Or maybe you see somebody has fire coating and you have a flamethrower and you need to have something that can punch through a little bit better. So you reveal this and suddenly you have the weapon you need. The complex system is basically the same thing, but you're spending 8 points to get 6. So if you notice, it's 4 for 3 and then 4 for 3 twice on this one. You can only have one of them, but they're both pretty cool. And really, for 2 build points, to be able to add 6 build points worth of weapon at any given point, this card here, if you can afford it, you have to think about it. You have to think about it, because having the knowledge of what the cars are around you when you're adding your weapons, that is key, and really a huge advantage. I really like the way the concealment systems work. All right, and finally we're going to end with my favorite card, my favorite upgrade, the upgrade that will be on every single car I ever build. This card is the OP card. It is insane. It is so good. It is the stability controller. Basically, all this does is it takes 1 build point for your car and makes it into 1 crew point. And the conversion there is fantastic. A crew point is worth more than a build point. No matter how you look at it, the effects of a crew point are going to be better than effects of a single build point. So this card is just an automatic, yep, I have this. So if I'm playing a Division 3 game, I have 4 crew points. And 4 crew points in a Division 3 game is crazy good. If I'm playing a Division 12 game, guess what? I have 13 crew points, because spending 1 build point to get another crew point, 100% going to do that. I love this card. It's super simple, super easy, and it comes in the crew pack. So if you have this card, you have the crew and accessories and sidearms and gear to spend it on. I love this card. Love it. I'm not going to say there's not a lot of cards where I'm like, love, love, love. This is one of them. And there's a couple accessories we'll talk about in a bit that also get to that. All right, so those are upgrades. Let's talk about structure. So structure has a pattern for most of them. These are your structure cards. There's a ton of them. These are the only 2 cards that are different right now. So I'm going to zoom out just a touch here. And essentially, structure is going to be something that you can put on each part of your car, except for these 2. These 2 are special. So this one here is the ram plate. It can only go on the front. And this says when the front of your car touches a heavy obstacle, that obstacle takes 2 damage in addition to whatever other collision damage. Now, if you couple this with the spike bumper, the bumper spikes here, now, and this is just an accessory, when the front of your car touches a heavy obstacle or wall, it takes additional 1. This is making the front of your car do an extra 3 points of damage on collisions. This is just a great combination. Now, this will get destroyed as it takes damage. It is structure, and the structure is going to get destroyed after the armor is destroyed. But until then, you're doing some significant damage here. I really like this. But you can also add a slab to the back. This is, again, a structure card, but it only allows the back. It has 5 durability, and it unlocks a slab token. So basically, that's this here. And this is a wall, so it can't be moved once it's dropped. It has partial cover, so it's going to add a shield if it's between you and your target, or your attackers, you're on the other side of it. But it can be destroyed. So once it takes 5 damage, the wall is destroyed. But the way this works is you drop this behind your car. As you're driving down, you drop this behind your car. Again, this is back only. And it just sits there. Now, the difference with this and most drop weapons is this you can drop at the end of any movement point. So you may drop your slab token behind your car and flip this card face down after any movement point. Keep in mind, this has 5 durability. When you drop this, the 5 durability drops to this. If, however, you've already taken some damage on the back and you drop it, it doesn't transfer to this. This is a fresh 5 points of durability. So you might want to take some damage on the back before you drop it, or save it for when you want it to go, or whatever the case is. It's an interesting weapon. Well, it's an interesting obstacle creator. So those are the two special structures. The rest of them follow a pattern. So let's take a look at this pattern. And again, I have an incomplete pattern because I have an incomplete set of structure cards because I don't have all of the structure cards from the other car kits. So we're going to build a matrix here, and we're going to see, we're going to be able to predict what is missing. And I'm actually going to take the ones off for now, and we'll just pop that out here. And all structure we can evaluate in the same way because they all follow the same basic idea. And that is, as things get good, they are going to give you less, well, as the dice on them get better, they're going to give you less defense. And the higher the base defense, the worse the dice are that are going to be available. So these are the level 2s, or 0.2s, 0.3, 0.4s. These are and this is the one. Essentially, the pattern here, besides the steel plate, when attacked on this side, add a black die to your defense roll. The steel plate is, it only gives you one structural defense. So as soon as this dies, you don't get the black die anymore, and the black die has a pretty low chance of getting you a shield anyway, 1 in 6 again. So this one here is a tricky one. If you're going to put structure on, you might want to try to go higher because 1 more point and these things get significantly better. But since this is ×4, if you want structure all the way around the car, maybe the 1 point is fine. Or if you have no structure but an extra point, maybe you throw it out there to get that extra defense. Whatever you want to do, this is just a low point card. It's going to low point, low return card. Now, the rest of them sort of work the same way, and let's take a look at the 3 costs because this is a good example of how this works. So here we can see that the ceramic plate has 6 durability. The laminate has 5 durability, but allows you to roll a black die on defense. The ablative coating has 4 durability, but allows you to roll 2 black dice on defense. Still a pretty low chance. You're still talking like 33% or 0.3 on average. It's the odds of rolling it are different, but 0.3 on average. And then we have the steel plate, which allows you to roll a green and a yellow die. And on average there, that's about a 0.5. If you do the math here, they're basically all the same. It just depends on how long you think this structure is going to last and how many times you're going to get to roll these dice. These on this end are going to pay off more the more armor you have, because as long as you have armor, you get to keep rolling these dice. These are going to pay off more if you don't have armor, because that structure is just automatically going to be defending for you. If you have defensive rerolls, these could be better. And it's just kind of a granular scale. You can't really go wrong. You just have to decide, hey, am I going to have a lot of ace tokens? Maybe it makes sense to have extra dice to reroll. I don't plan on having a lot of ace tokens, and my dice rolling skills are terrible, so I'm going to go with the high defense. So that's essentially how all the structure is going to work. And even though I have a few holes here, I could imagine that we're going to see some more level 1 or 1 point cost structures. And I'm expecting to see a 2 here that's going to give us probably 4 defense for this 2 costs, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then here I probably expect to see a 5 defense here. So 8, 7, 5, 2. And then this is going to have some kind of either 2, well, green and black are the same when you're talking about rolling for defense. I don't know why there's a green. So like these 2 dice here, it's like when attacked, add a black to your defense roll. Here, when attacked, add a green to your defense roll. It's the exact same thing. Black and green are the same. They both just have 1 shield. They're both really bad for defense. But here, this adds a yellow, green, and black, but it only gives you 2 structure. It seems great, but add these all up. Yellow, green, and black, and you're still only, on average, a 0.67 armor per roll, which may not be as good as just having 8 straight up structure here. So that's structure in a nutshell. We'll see what the other car sets bring as far as structure, but I don't expect to see any major surprises. I expect that structure is going to be always following this pattern. Should you have structure on your car? Maybe. Structure is really good if you have a particularly important weapon, and say you have. All right, so we have this recoilless weapon here, right? It has 2 armor, but after that, I don't have any front weapons. So maybe, and if I'm in a low point game, maybe what I want to do is add some, I'll spend 3 points to add this here. So now there has to be 6 damage that gets through before it even has a chance of hitting this weapon. So, but on the side, I don't care because I'm just going to use sidearms for the side. I'm not going to put any weapons there. So I don't need any structure on the side. That's the type of thing that you can think about when you're building structure. You don't need the same structure cards all the way around. You can use different structure, different levels of structure on different sides. You can even decide, hey, I want to try all 4 2-point things, just see how I feel about it, and have different setups on each side if you want to. But you can never have more than 1 structure per side. All right, let's talk about accessories. Accessories do need to be equipped to the car. And some accessories are going to tell you that there's specific locations for them, such as back only for the advanced brakes. Accessories are fantastic for their point value. Some of my favorite cards are accessories. Not as much as I love the stability controller. This is just the most broken card ever. But it is 1 point, so it's not that broken. It's just, this is great. This is great. I love crew. If you don't like crew as much as I do, then maybe you're not going to like this, but I love it. All right. Let's talk about speed control with accessories. There are a couple that come in the core box. We have the Super Booster and the Advanced Brakes, and these both do the same thing, giving extra ace token on your control step and allow you to either speed up or slow down without taking the damage. That's pretty darn cool. Now, if we remember, we have Ghost, who's a 1-point crew that can do the same thing, but she has to spend control to do it. Here, you actually get ace tokens. It's 2 build points. These 2 combined, because they're build points and not crew points, probably better than Ghost because it really does the same thing. Also, it adds 2 defense. So if you have the 2 build points to spare, this is not terrible. The difference between this and Ghost is when Ghost dies, she loses her ability. Here, these things can be destroyed. And then later in the game where you really want to be able to speed up and slow down at will, these might be destroyed. Now, there are also 2 other one-time use. And this is the drag chute, which automatically sets your speed to 0, and then you flip this down. And this is the superconductor, which automatically sets your speed to 5, and then you flip this down. So these are one-time uses, punch it or stop real fast. So these are good. Now, I did mention the airless tires are a problem if you can't slow down. So if you get the airless tires, maybe you put this on the back. So if you do need to slow down from speed 4 to speed 0, you can take this and do this. So, and this is during your check speed step. You may decelerate to speed 0. So this happens before you get to choose your speed. So you can actually go to 0 and then speed up 1, and then this one's the same way. You can go to 5 and then slow down 1 if you want to do that. So you could think of these as actually cards that will take you to 4 or 5, or take you to 0 or 1. Or in this case, 0 or reverse, 0, 1 or reverse. So these are, if you want to have a very maneuverable car as far as speed, take a look at those cards. Now we also have a few control here. We have a few of them. I think those are mostly our control ones. So actually, we're going to save a couple special ones to the end that are also control based. But so our aerodynamic firings. You ignore 1 wrench when making maneuvers at speed 4 or 5. This is really not terrible. At 4 or 5, you're almost guaranteed tire damage. And this is saying, nah, just ignore 1 of them. And you're not really going to get that much more tire damage than 1. If you do, that's all right. But if you want to drive fast and still turn, this one is almost a must-have. And again, you can take all of these. Their accessories have none, no subtypes that you can't take together. So anything you see in accessories, you can just take them all. Here, the splitter, just take an extra 3 ace tokens. If you're making an ace token build, it's a no-brainer. The autopilot, this one's a little complicated. Essentially what you do is, if there are no control tokens on it, you can spend 3 ace tokens to put a control token on it. If there is a control token on it, then once per turn, you can use the control token on this to spend to when you need control. So this is really nice where if you have extra ace tokens, you can put a control token here on one turn and then use it on the next turn. And you can do this at any point. So it's just, if there are no control tokens on this, you may spend 3 ace tokens to place 1 control on this from the supply. It doesn't say when you can do this, so I would just say anytime on your turn. And then once per turn, you may pay a control from this, for using when you need to pay control. And this can be for collisions or explosions as well, that you can pull this off. So it's a very interesting card. For one, it just kind of lets you bank a control. Actually, it lets you turn ace tokens into control and then bank that. And then we have our spoiler. This one is take an extra ace token during your control step. And when you would lose a control token as a result of a driving roll, you can spend 3 ace tokens instead. And you can do this as often as you want. So again, if you're making a high ace token build, this might be a good one to bring with you, because now not only do you have a lot of ace tokens, you have a lot of control tokens that you can be using, but only during driving rolls for this one. So this wouldn't work for collisions or explosions. All right, let's talk about fire. There's multiple ways of putting out fire. The standard way is spending 2 control tokens during the manage fire step. The fire extinguisher allows you to spend 2 control tokens during the combat phase. The reason why this is nice is because if you're in the combat phase and you still have control tokens left, you might as well spend it to extinguish that fire. But if you needed those control tokens because of driving rolls or collisions or explosions or whatever the case is, you want to reserve those, you don't want to pre-spend them, then this is a nice way of just saying, I'm just going to hold on to them, and then maybe I'll put them out later. Now, you're still going to take the point of damage from the fire if you don't put it out during the managed fire step, but it does give you another way of putting out fires. This one here, I really like this one a lot. Once per maneuver, you may add 2 blue dice to your driving roll, and if you do, you get to extinguish 1 fire. This is really fun. This says, I'm going to just try to drive crazy to put that fire out. And with 2 blue dice, yeah, you're probably going to you're going to lose an extra control. But the worst case scenario is you're going to spend 2 control to put out a fire, which you're already going to do with the fire extinguisher or managing fires. The best case scenario is it doesn't cost you anything. And on average, you're going to spend 1 control to pull out the fire. I really like this card. It doesn't cause any damage to itself to put out the fire. And it's just a fun card to think about how that works. And then finally, we have Fire Suppressant. This one is during your managed fire steps, when a fire deals damage to any side of your car, it does damage to this card instead, and then it goes out. So this allows you to automatically put out 3 fires. This is probably the better choice of all of them, because it just says 3 fires, I'm not going to have to worry about them. It is a great fire defense system. So if you're playing with friends that like using fire, you can have all 3. Again, you can have as many accessories as you want. If your friends really like playing with fire, just add 2 or 3 of them, and they won't use fire anymore. All right, let's take a look at our Radar Jammer. This is another really great card. This is another card that looks really great. So what this does is it adds a green die to each of your defense rolls. And it's just straight up add a green die. And as much as I talk about black dice being bad for defense, green dice are also just as bad. They have the exact same chance as black dice. So what I would say here is go ahead and if you want those extra dice, by all means, you could be rolling a handful of black and green dice with all these, armor upgrades. But it's going to be a mix. Now, the one thing I do like about this over anything else we've talked about, especially for structure, is this just always happens. You always get this green die no matter what happens until this accessories is damaged. And the only way the accessory gets damaged is if you take accessory damage on the side of a card that it's equipped on. So in that regard, I think this is probably one of the better add a black or green die for defense. But it's 2 points and it's a relatively low chance of anything good happening from it. We have a couple suspensions and a power cell that I want to cover here. And there's one more suspension and I'm going to talk about in just a sec, but we're going to talk about these first. So the power cell here is not a suspension, but it feels a little way in, you'll see. Once per driving roll, you may convert one of the wrenches to a shield. So instead of taking tire damage, you can take just control damage, which is kind of nice, and it's per driving roll. So that by itself is really, really nice. But also, you may take 2 tire damage to increase your power plant by 1 if you do flip this face down. That's really, really good. Again, it doesn't say when you can do this. So I would say anytime on your turn is how we'd probably rule it. But the fact that you can do this means this is the only way to heal anything that I've seen so far. This actually heals your power plant, which is great. And it's not even losing this durability because you're just transferring the damage you take anyway to the power plant. And it has this static effect on top of it. The power cell's a really nice card. Now, rugged suspension. When you roll 3 or more shields on a driving roll, ignore one of them, or skids. So essentially, if I rolled 3 skids, I'd only take 2 control damage. And then if I rolled 4, I'd take 3, etc. Rolling more than 3 is a relatively rare occurrence. So this card was going to trigger and have you kind of push that back to 2 more often than not. I think if you want to drive fast and do a lot of maneuvers, this is another one that makes a lot of sense to have on your car because you're going to just have that much more control to handle it. And speaking of control, the dynamic suspension, take 1 control during your take control step. Also add an ace token equal to the highest terrain level of the car you're overlapping. So this one here, if you're playing with terrain, again, is a fantastic card, but it's also going to give you an extra control in your control step. Now, my favorite suspension, though, is the off-road suspension. If you're playing with terrain, this is 100% must-have. If you're not playing with terrain, it's a 98% must-have. So what this does is when your car is overlapping a level 1 terrain or higher, or you're out of control, or both, then you add a yellow to your defense roll. If you're playing with terrain, this basically just gives you a plus yellow on all your defense rolls. So it's kind of like the radar jammer, but it's a better die and it's cheaper if you're playing with terrain and you're on a level 1 terrain. But also, if you have the tendency to go out of control, a yellow die when you're out of control is one of the best dice you can get. Now, blue and red would be better, but yellow is still a really good die, especially if you have any ace tokens for rerolls. For 1 point, this card is really, really good. I really, really like it. It's probably my go-to for I just want some extra dice to roll for defense. Because honestly, on a normal roll, if I have my speed dice, I'm going to be re-rolling them, and it's going to be unlikely that I max those out anyway. It's when I don't have my speed dice that I really care, and that's where I really want the better dice. Now, the beer refrigerator, I'm going to talk about this by itself. It's a 0 cost. Its effect is when one of your crew members takes damage, apply it to this card first. So it essentially gives you 2 extra crew life, which is similar to what the power plant and the armor and the tire upgrades are in the same way. It gives you 2 extra points of damage. Armor gives you 4. But the downside to this, and the reason it costs 0, is that when you're making a maneuver, you add a blue to your driving roll. Now, blue are great for defense. They're not so great for driving rolls because you're going to spend a lot of control here. I just love the way this card, the flavor, the theme of this card is amazing. You're going around shooting each other in cars, at the same time drinking beer from your beer fridge that's in the back of your car. So you're not very good at driving, but also damage doesn't affect you as much because you just don't care. This card is fun. I'm not sure if I'd want to use it in most cases. That extra blue die can, add up pretty fast, but it's still a lot of fun. And it's 0 points, so you can try it on any build you want. All right, my 3 favorite accessories. The first one here is the targeting computer. This is 1 point. And not affecting sidearms, but any weapon, you may add a blue to one of your attacks each round. So it's an extra 0.5 point of damage, 1 point, adds to any weapon that you might fire except for sidearms. Sidearms are technically not weapons, they're sidearms, but it's nice to clarify the difference there. But yeah, I just love the targeting computer. It goes really well with the firing interface. Once per attack, you may reroll 1 die. I love rerolling dice. This with a rookie gunner, you have 3 rerolls on that when the gunner rolls. And when we talk about linked weapons, it can get super crazy. And then we have the radar detector. You get 2 defense rerolls each time you are attacked. This, in conjunction with the suspension, means even if I'm out of control, I get a yellow die, but it's essentially the equivalent of 3 yellow dice, which almost guarantee a defense no matter what if I'm out of control. Because on average, 3 yellow dice are going to roll at least 1 defense. And that's only 2 points. So these cards here, actually these cards here, I would have a hard time in most games not just auto-including all of these. These are just, for me, I love what these cards do. They're simple, they're straightforward, and they just do good things. Those are my go-to. Add that with the stability controller, and here's my first 5 points I spend on build points. Now, that might change on a level 1 car where I only have 4 build points, but maybe not by that much. I might actually, at 4 build points, I'd probably remove, it's a tough one, but I think I might remove the targeting computer since this only applies to 1 of my attacks. And then, so this would be the 4 build points in my level 1, and then I would just upgrade my crew to have a better sidearm and maybe the Whiplash who can shoot forward and backward with the hand cannon. And that would be my Division 1 build. It just, yeah. And then on up, you're just adding, you're sweetening the pot. It just gets so good at that point. But tell me, like, whether or not you think is that a broken combo? Is it a combo that's not as good as I think it is? I don't know. I think it's actually pretty good. So let's talk about weapons. I promise this video is going to be less than an hour. I am not going to talk about all of these. I'm going to talk about them in categories, and we'll talk about the restrictions for them as well. So weapons. First, we should talk about just restrictions in general. Now, this works for all build cards, but weapons are specifically, these apply a lot more to weapons. So anytime that something's mentioned in range, it's talking car length, not turnkeys. A turnkey is a range 2 measuring tool. It's 2 car lengths long. One-shot weapons, when you use them, you flip them over, which means if they were damaged, they get flipped over. If they were not damaged, they get flipped over. And the durability that they would have absorbed is lost when you flip them over. Location's pretty obvious. That's just where you can put it on your dashboard. Side arc fire, you can shoot from either side. These are essentially only sidearms that have that. Exclusive, only 1 per car. So you can't have 2 exclusives regardless of what they are. Now, the concealment systems are exclusive. When you flip them over, though, you no longer have an exclusive attached to the car, so you could replace a concealment system with an exclusive. And then dropped weapons, what dropped means is you can only equip it on the left, right, or back. You can't put a dropped weapon on the front of your car. That would be bad. So let's take a look at the basic types of weapons. Slug weapons are slug and shred weapons are the most plentiful of weapons. So these are our slug weapons, and our shred weapons are here. Also, nice big stack. Now, this is, again, I am missing 20 weapons from the other packs. I expect to see more of these, though, not less. Blast and fire weapons, they are relatively basic. They're pretty, you're going to need to know about them. They're standard damage, but there's not a lot of them. So let's take a look at slug weapons first. And the defining feature of a slug weapon is typically, and you can see up here, slug weapons always do standard damage. In fact, all of these cards have standard damage to them. They also tend not to have any special abilities. They're about as straightforward as you get, and some of the bigger ones you can only put on the front and back of the car. Slug weapons are the weapons that you equip if you don't know, if you don't like rolling, if you don't have any weapon rerolls, you don't want to worry about any of that, you just want some consistent average damage, slug weapons are the way to go. Now, looking at all slug weapons, you can chart these. And I'm not going to go over this chart a whole lot because I'm actually going to give you a link to what helps me make this chart, so you can actually start, comparing your own weapons. But here is just kind of a chart of all the different slug weapons from 1 to 7. And I basically took a sample at each of the different levels. And you can see that in general, they tend to all be relatively high at low damage levels, and they drop off super quick. And the high levels, even the ones that can get up there, have a very low chance of getting the high amount. This is just the curve for all of your slug weapons. Is what it's going to look like. So this is just the 2 at 3 points. I like looking at, comparing smaller ones are better. So our jackhammer has essentially a set 2 points of damage, and then it rolls a black die to see if you get that third damage. So 1 in 6 times, your fourth damage, I'm sorry. 1 in 6 times, you're going to get the fourth point of damage, but you'll always get that 3 points. Where the heavy recoilless rifle, that is going to be, so this is the jackhammer. See this here. That's your jackhammer, and then your heavy recoilless rifle is this here. So again, it just gives you a little bit more variability in where this is at, but your average damage is still pretty high on the low end side, and then as you get higher, it drops down really fast to get the maximum damage. So this really just depends on what you like. Do you like rolling dice, or do you not like rolling dice to do damage? Now, if you like rolling dice, let's talk about shred weapons, because these are the next most common type, and all shred weapons have the same idea, which is if you roll a wrench, you're going to convert that to tire damage. Tire damage is great because it's just like regular damage. It just applies to tires first. If you're defending against it, tire damage is always what's defended against first, making it just like real damage. If you roll 2 tire damage and 3 regular damage, and your defender rolls 2 defense, you're still getting 3 regular damage through. It's the same thing as if you would have rolled just 5 regular damage. They defended 2, you still got 3 through. So shred weapons are really, really nice. Plus, we have a driver that adds a black die to shred weapons, making them even better. So you can combo these with some of your crew cards to really make these pretty darn potent. But again, they all are just going to give you some extra tire damage. And now there are some special cases. Here we have a spike gun and it has a special situation. But again, I'll let you take a look at those special ones on your own. But the core concept's the same here. So let's take a look at 3 of these that are 3-point weapons. And you can see they all kind of follow this same, the curve's a little bit nicer on these ones because the average gets spread out a little bit more. So if we compare the two, if we compare our heavy machine gun with our heavily recoilless weapon, remember the recoilless is a slug weapon and the machine gun is a shred weapon, you can see 3-point weapons are 3-point weapons. Your slug weapon has a better chance of getting you at least some base damage, and your shred weapons have a better chance of getting you more damage later on. But these curves are pretty similar. It really just depends on your playstyle, what you want to do there. Now, let's take a look at blast weapons. These ones are a little controversial. Blast weapons in general the way they work is if they all have the same thing here, as a wrench turns into an explosion. The way an explosion works is if it triggers on a car, the first symbol that has an explosion causes the car to lose a control. It doesn't do any damage, it just causes the car to lose a control. All additional explosion will just go straight through. Now, these tend to be point-wise a lot more expensive than others. And in some situations, in most situations, that control loss isn't going to be a big deal. So if I have a light rocket here, this gets a 1 shot. Now I do have technically 2 shots because I get to include a second light rocket. But if I attack with this and the explosion doesn't trigger, I'm doing a small amount of damage. Yellow, green, and blue, if we look at our damage piece here, if we just look at damage, yellow, green, and blue, we're going to do an average of, actually, this isn't too bad. This is going to be an average of 2 damage. But 2 damage isn't significant when you're hitting someone that's going speed 4 and it maybe has some structure. If you roll an explosion, then you're doing less damage. But when you're rolling the explosion, you have only a 2 in 6 chance because only the green die here is going to give you the chance for an explosion. So it's high risk, high reward. Really what you want to do is you want to fire these as your first shot to put a car out of control so you can hit with your second shot and they don't have any defense dice for speed. That's how explosive weapons really work well. Another thing you can do is if they have 2 control left, maybe you tap them a little bit with your car, then you hit them with a rocket, and then you finish them off with your second shot because now, again, they're out of control, even though they had 2 control at the end of the movement phase. I will say there is one of these that I really, really, really dislike, and that is a rocket that's going to be, I'm going to show later when I show special ammo. But otherwise, I think these are great. The one thing that you should be aware of is there's only one that is not currently, that is not a disposable, like a 1-shot or a 2-shot, and that is the hammerhead, which can only be on the front or back. But the hammerhead has, you know, 1/3 chance of getting an explosion, and it's reusable. It's going to be, you're going to keep doing it. It is a 6-point weapon, so it only works in Division 7 plus for car builds, but it is a pretty cool explosive weapon if you want to try out an explosion build. And then here we can see, you know, the standard rockets at 3-point blast versus an anti-power plant rocket. This by itself doesn't really help so much. So again, I'm going to show you how to use the chart in a second. But if we look at the cross chart here, this is where we see these are all 3-point weapons. So remember, the blue one is our recoilless weapon. That's our slug. The red is our shred weapon. And now this is our rocket. But you have to remember the first point of damage on this is actually not going to do damage. So this whole line could be slid back way behind this because this is taking into account that explosion damage counts as a point. It's just the best way to calculate this and think about it is special damage. Just treat it like a normal point of damage because you should use it when it counts and don't use it when it doesn't. And then it actually does play out like this. Now, the downside to this is the standard rocket. Even though you get 2 of them, you only get 2 shots. These other ones, you can shoot as many times as you want. So keep that in mind. And when, this is very important, when these weapons are used, they do damage to themselves, which is essentially the same as doing damage to you. When you use this weapon, you take a point of damage because you are flipping this over and you no longer have that point of damage that can absorb future hits. So take that into consideration when you're looking at like 1-shot weapons and that such. All right, fire weapons. This is the last of the damage types. You're going to get flamethrowers in the core set. You also get heat sabers, which are your high level in the core set. They have a range of 2, so you can't set things on fire at a range. Except for, we also have these rockets here, which don't have a range of 2, but they're 1-shots. And they have a really good chance of setting something on fire because there's a black die here. And that black die has a really good chance of setting things on fire. I actually really like these light incendiary rockets. The issue with them, though, is you don't get the 2 for 1. So this is, if you want 2 of these, you're going to spend 2 points on them. All right. And we are going to, this is having, well, I've just added linked flamethrowers are here, and you can see there's a max damage here. We'll talk about the linked in a second. All right. Shock, laser, and melee. Shock weapons, they do fire damage, but more rarely. Laser weapons, they reduce range rerolls, and melee weapons are range 1. So let's take a look at our shock weapons. There's only one that's a pure shock weapon in so far, and this is a level 8. Basically, a shock weapon has the idea that wrenches are going to be straight up damage, so it just gives you a better chance of getting damage. And if you roll 2 wrenches, then it does damage to itself. But it starts out with a higher durability. The odds of rolling 2 wrenches are relatively low. They're not great. If you think about it, only green dice have it. There's basically like a 66% chance that it's going to do damage to itself. And even then, that's probably okay because you're doing a lot of damage with the shock weapons. And this one actually does not do fire. I may have misspoke on that. Actually, lasers are the ones that are rare fire damage. Shock weapons are do extra points of damage. So let's take a look at lasers. Lasers have two things that make them special. One is the defender gets 2 fewer rerolls on range rerolls, and wrenches cause fire. But it's a red die, so there's only a 1 in 6 chance that you're going to get fire on a wrench for shock weapon or for laser weapons. And all of the laser weapons are like that. They have a relatively low chance of being able to trigger since only the red die has the wrench. But they are, if you're dealing with a really big arena game and you want to stay far away, they're a great way to reduce range rerolls, which ups damage at high range. Speaking of high range, let's talk about low range and melee. So the melee weapons are, this is set 1, set 3. Close range, the green dice are great for attacks. It's a pretty common thing that you're going to do 3 or 4 damage with this melee weapon. It's just, that's the way it works. It's good, but it's only a range 1. And then the bone saw is really, really good. This could do 2 here, 2 there, 2 there. It could do up to 6 points of damage for a 3-cost weapon. And it's not even hard to get to 6 points of damage with this weapon. So the melee builds, you want to kind of couple that with a collision. So if you have a collision build and a melee build, you put those together, you can do some serious damage as you smash into someone, lower their defense or get rid of their defense rolls altogether, and then hit them with a melee on top of that. Yeah, it's timing because you need to move last so you're in the right spot so that your melee weapons can trigger on your turn. But yeah, they're kind of cool. All right. Again, we're going to cover this more in a moment. Let's talk about some special weapons. First, my favorite of the special weapons, and that's linked weapons. Now, there's nothing too special about linked weapons besides the fact that they give you 2 free rerolls. That's it. So it's not like, oh, this is a linked weapon, so I get 2 bush cutters. Nope. You spend 2 points for that. You spend 2 points for that. The image shows you that there's 2 there. And so the way it works is now you have 2 side by side, and and the rerolls basically simulate the idea that you're firing 2 at the same time in a single attack round, as opposed to having any other kind of special rules. So I love that for their simplicity, but I also love re-rolling attack dice. And all of the link weapons have that re-roll of the attack dice. Now they also have their own types as well. So there's shred, there's fire, another shred. Here's a shock weapon that's a linked weapon. Again, this converts into real dice and will do damage to itself, or real basic damage and does damage to itself. When attacking with this weapon, again, just 2 rerolls. This is just so good, so good. I love rerolling. And then here's the linked hammerheads, which is another explosion damage weapon that doesn't destroy itself. And with a white and a red die, explosions are pretty likely to happen with this one. So that's an added plus. So that is our linked weapons. Turreted weapons. These are all exclusive, and a few things to think about when you're talking about turreted weapons are they are weapon armor for all sides. If you have an extra 3 points, put one of these 4 durability turrets on the top of your car. The damage is abysmal. It can shoot in all directions, but it's like a pea shooter. But 4 defense of armor for weapons on all sides, that is actually really, really well. Remember, the defender chooses where the damage goes. So if I have some important weapons on the outside and I get hit, I can apply the damage here first. And that's really cool. So I think the high durability turreted weapons are definitely the most valuable. Honestly, the damage themselves aren't even worth talking about. This one here, turreted particle beam, this is another reusable that does fire, but again, super rare that the fire is going to hit. And it's a laser, so it reduces rerolls. Again, you have some range 2 weapons that do a little bit more on the turreted side, so the range 2s are all right, and still 3 durability is great. The micro missile, this only has 2 durability. It's only 1 shot, which sort of sucks, but it's almost a guaranteed explosion. So if somebody is in a situation where they only have one control left and you really want to knock them out of control, this is almost a guarantee that that's going to happen, especially if any rerolls. But even if you don't, 2 black dice are definitely going to roll an explosion most of the time. Definitely most of the time. 2 black dice, the average that you're going to roll is 1.3 or something. So yeah, this is worth thinking about in that situation, but that situation only. The light rocket is okay, and the turreted heavy rocket is possibly the worst weapon in the game, in my opinion. I will never ever use this for a couple reasons. 1, 8 points for a one-shot weapon that takes off my exclusive slot, that has a okay shot chance of getting an explosion, but also only has 1 durability, so I can't even use it as defense, and it's 8 points. The damage curve on this is pretty good. If you have rerolls, you could probably do a lot of damage with it for one shot. But oh man, it's hurt. Now there is one worse weapon, but this one, it's just so expensive for one shot. I really wish this wasn't a one shot. I really wish this just had multiple durability and it did damage to itself, so that it had multiple missiles it could fire, since it's mounted on the top and it's not a single weapon. But it's not. This is what it is. You won't see me playing with this, but yeah, you might. Your mileage may vary on that. All right, let's talk about some special rounds. Incendiary rounds. So this is essentially a shred weapon that does fire damage, which typically is meant for fire cards. But because it does fire damage on a wrench, which is 1 in 6 with a red card, so it's not that frequent, it still does do a tire damage, and it's an automatic plus. So this really adds this should be a 1 here, but it's a yellow 1, so they put it there. So your chances of doing decent damage with this are pretty high. Your chances of doing fire damage with it aren't as great. I liked it. It's a fun, flavorful weapon. Tracer rounds are really fun. So you take a control or ace token during your control step, and if you have 2 of these equipped, you're going to take 2. And then you can spend ace tokens to reroll dice when you attack with this weapon. So it's a 1-for-1. I really love that, especially since one of the dice we get to reroll are white, and blue dice, when you reroll those, it's just like flipping a coin again. The white die is going to hit on 4 sides with tire damage. It's like this weapon is really, really fun. Again, I'm a little bit addicted to weapon rerolls. All right, this here, I believe, wins my award for worst weapon in the game. Again, your mileage may vary. It may be the best thing ever. There are edge case situations where this could be like the game-winning thing. But the reason I don't like this, it is a one-shot. It is exclusive as a rocket. And it has to be equipped to a side. So it's not even a turret. You have to pick the side that you want to put on. It only has 1 durability, so it can't absorb any damage. And you can't put a turret to protect it because it's exclusive. What it does is so anytime you roll a wrench, it's going to cause an explosion, but it's a red die, so it's only going to cause an explosion on one side, if at all. And when attacking with this item, so essentially what this does, the special ability is, when attacking with it, if a damage card is drawn, the first line of the card is always power plant limit 1. So this gives you 1 point of power plant damage that can punch through structure. It can't punch through armor, but it can punch through structure. There's just too limiting. Even at a 3-point cost, it's just too limiting. Now, maybe if you have a high build, you don't have anything else that's exclusive, you're like, well, I have 3 points, I don't know what to spend it on. Equip this one, it could be good. The cost isn't ridiculous. It's just, this is a hard one for me to justify until I get killed by it. So, but if that is the worst weapon, let's talk about the worst weapon class, and that's dropped weapons. So drop weapons all essentially have the same idea. They're going to give you 4 special cards or tokens. So for the mines, you're going to drop these mines, and they're going to drop on the ground behind or beside your car. Once you've dropped all 4 of them, the weapon doesn't flip over, so you can still absorb damage with it, but they're just out there. You can't drop anymore. That's fine, except for these are so easy to avoid, and you can be pushed into your own dropped weapons. They're okay. They cost 1 point for 2 armor, which isn't bad, but there's a whole bunch of weapons that cost 1 point for 2 weapon armor. And when I say armor, I mean that 50% of the times weapon durability counts as defense. But again, there's a whole bunch of reusable 1 points that actually can do damage. They cost your attack to drop, and they don't do anything immediate. You have to try to position yourself so other cars can run into these things, but they can also slide around pretty easily. I've never actually gotten mines to work. The spikes are a little bit better. Spikes drop hazard cards. So they take up a little bit more space, and you're going to drop them front, back, left, right, wherever you happen to have the weapon equipped. And what this does is when a car drives over it, they roll 2 black dice, and they're going to take tire damage, presumably, if they roll wrenches, or they could also take control damage if they roll shields. And it's a black die, so there's only a 1 in 6 chance of not having this do something per die. Like, basically, this is always going to do something if you can get a car to hit it. But again, it's pretty easy to avoid, and it takes your attack to drop it. It's rough. It's a rough one to talk about, to do. The foam drops these big tokens that are then pushed around. So this is featherweight. So this means it's an obstacle that you can push, and if it ever gets pushed between 2 heavy obstacles, it pops. It goes away. Now, the thing with this is it is full cover. So if you drop this, you can get 3 extra defense from this if someone's like shooting you from behind. But also, if you drop this and you try to shoot someone that's on the other side, they also get the cover as well. So it's a strategic weapon to drop, well, strategic defense to drop down. This one does have its uses. It just sort of depends on the scenario. Oil cards work like spike cards. Not quite as good as spike. They're just automatically always going to cause 2 control whenever you move over them. And then the smoke cards work similar in nature to the foam, except you can't push it around. It stays on forever, and it's partial cover. So essentially it adds 1 shield. They're okay. I would say try them out. See if you find something that you like with them. They are more for fun. If you have some extra points to throw on there, you might find the right time to use them, but they're not going to be things that are going to win you a game when you use them, because they don't do any damage when you attack. So, I know I'm going a little long. It's weapons. But I do want to show you one other thing. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes for this. So let me do this. There I am. Hi. So this is a Google Sheet I put together that has pre-rolled odds for all of the weapons that are currently released. And when I get the other packs, I'll add these on here as well. And basically the way this works is you can come over here and you can compare up to 9 weapons, although you really don't need to. And so in this case here, I'm comparing 3 different slug weapons. They're all 3 points. And I'm just saying, okay, what is the curve for this? And we can see that, the heavy recoilless and the standard recoilless have the exact same chance of getting 2 or more damage. And then the heavy recoilless starts to pull ahead in doing more damage. Now, the standard recoilless rifle with explosive rounds is a reusable explosive, and that's why its damage curve is a little bit behind just your standard recoilless weapon. Now, the jackhammer here has a really high base damage with only a small chance of getting an extra bonus damage. So this is just a way of saying, well, what do I like? Do I want to be able to just be consistent at 3, or do I want to have a 25, 30% chance, 40% chance of getting 4, which is more than the 17% chance of getting 4 on this one? And do I have any chance at all of getting 5? No, not on the jackhammer, but you do on the heavy recoilless rifle. So these types of things allow you to determine what's good and what's not. And if you want to change that, you can go over here and you can basically type, say I want to take a look at all of the shred weapons. So I can type shred, and then I can see all of my shreds and my point costs here. And okay, what is the difference between a standard machine gun, which is 2 points, and then let's compare that with the turreted machine gun, which is 3 points. And we can see the turreted machine gun is much worse than the standard machine gun, which is 1 point cheaper. but the turret has the advantage of being able to shoot in all arcs. So what is your penalty here? Well, your penalty is essentially a full damage and the ability not to cap out at 5, right? So this is 1 less damage all the way across the board. So this sheet I'll put a link to in the notes below. The very first thing you're going to have to do, though, if you want to use this, is you need to go to File and make a copy. Since editing this, you won't have edit access to this. But once you've made a copy, you can change this to your heart's content and try all the different combinations to see what's good for you. The data tab is literally just the data that runs here, so there's no actual weapon data in here, but it does give you the percentages that I've already pre-calculated. And then the dice matrix is just kind of a reference, so you can see where these dice averages range, and then if you want the dice faces here. So like I say, if you've watched an hour and 10 minutes, well, congratulations. You now know that this link exists and how to use it. And hopefully it does some, it's useful for you. And, well, that is it. That's a really long video, as about as thorough as I could make it. I think all in all, I did about 2.5 hours of this build guide. Hopefully it's fun and entertaining, or at least educational. So until I do a review of all the expansions, which won't happen until I get an extra 2 more car sets, keep blowing stuff up.